Unknowns to my parents is that both John and Sarah were pedophiles. And at age 4.5, in front of my siblings, I was taken. I was kidnapped overnight, taken to California, and then trafficked, abused and trafficked for a full 6 years.
Hi friends, this is Read and Write with Natasha podcast. My name is Natasha Tynes and I'm an author and a journalist. In this channel, I talk about the writing life, review books, and interview authors. Hope you enjoy the journey. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Read and Write with Natasha. Today we have with us author Antonio Salazar-Hobson. He was the 11th of 14th migrant farm workers, children born in Phoenix, Arizona. Antonio, at age 4, was kidnapped by a childless, middle-aged white couple and was trafficked until the age of 10. As a teenager, Antonio met Cesar Chavez and was taken under his wing, a miracle which helped define his life. Antonio worked with Cesar over the next 2 decades. Antonio got a master's from Stanford in Latin American Studies as a Danforth Fellow, and then went on to graduate law school from U.S. Davis Law School and became a labor lawyer, working with the United Farmworkers and large international unions for the past 30 years. Antonio, wow, what a story. I don't think I will ever forget what I just read. I mean, it's... I don't know. I'm speechless. Mm-hmm. So I am not going to do the talking. I'm going to let you do the talking. So Antonio, welcome. So happy to have you here. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to read your story. So for anyone who is watching or listening, can you please tell us a bit about your book, your memoir? I have it here with me. Antonio, we know you. And tell us just a bit about your memoir.
Sure. Well, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be with you, Ms. Tynes, this morning. And I have followed all of your progressive work over the years, and it's been very, very impressive. I've had a chance to write this very unique memoir. As far as we know, it's the only kind in the genre that has ever existed. The book is called Antonio, We Know You, and it's predominantly a book about cultural pride, family love, family reconciliation, hope, and it's all set up against the background of what you alluded to, that I was kidnapped at age 4.5 by these wet pedophiles, by these white pedophiles. At the outset, and I'll go into more detail, the title of my book comes from Cesar Chavez, and the importance of the relationship which I had with him and how he completely shaped my life. I'd also like to just begin by saying that the foreword of my book is by Jimmy Santiago Bacan, who is the most famous poet and author of the last 40 years for Chicanos in the country, if not the world. And the book is being translated into Spanish. It's been fully translated. And now, as you've alluded to, my parents, Jesus and Petra Salazar, were migrant workers, and they worked the national fruit picking circuit throughout the United States for over 40 years, which means they never had a permanent home for themselves or their children. I am the 11th of 14 migrant children, and my family landed in Phoenix, Arizona, in the first projects built there. And astonishingly enough, you'll hear my name, Antonio Salazar-Hobson. All right, that's a very important fact here. The Hobsons lived virtually next door to where the Salazars were, within 100 feet of them. And they were childless, they were white, and they spoke Spanish, and they were the only white people who had ever befriended the Salazars, because we keep within our own culture. And unknowns to my parents is that both John and Sarah were pedophiles. And at age 4.5, in front of my siblings, I was taken. I was kidnapped overnight, taken to California, and then trafficked, abused and trafficked for a full 6 years, which was, of course, a very, very debilitating, soul-searing experience. But what I'm trying to emphasize is what I survived in the early years is really a backdrop to a story of great hope, of great love, and also of reconciliation. And I feel like a starting point is I didn't make it without any saviors in my life.
Mm.
My initial saviors were the Mexican families that I met along the way between the ages of 6 and 13, who befriended me, who took me under their wing. They never knew my true circumstances, but they knew I was a lost kid, and I was just accepted and fed. That was very important in terms of retaining my identity and my Spanish. But the first true savior was Cesar Chavez. And I was a farm worker student at age 15 in the Central Valley of California. And he invited many of my high school classmates, my Chicano classmates, to go meet him at a rally. And we were there 2 hours early, and he interviewed all of us one by one, 5 minutes or so at a time. And he saw something in me as a 15-year-old, which I absolutely did not see in myself. And he asked all of us present if we would volunteer to be his youth bodyguards, not only at that rally, but also at all the other rallies that were close to us in the Central Valley. And we agreed. And I did that for a year with him and was devoted. And Cesar took me aside, and I was 16 years old. And I was about to go to college. And he said, Antonio, I think you have the talent to become a labor lawyer for the movement. Would you consider doing that for me? And I never looked back. I had no dream prior to that dream. And I ran with that dream. I ran with that dream for 35, 40 years. And it's defined my life working on behalf of working people. I also just want to say that I wrote this book really for 3 reasons. One was, Natasha, was to provide a legacy for my family. As you know, people of color, their families, their histories are often, they go unwritten. Mm-hmm. Our dignity is taken away. Our hard work is taken away. The acknowledgement that we built this nation is taken away. And yet, obviously, white people have a preference in terms of their biographies and their memoirs. And the Salazars, like so many Chicanos, Mexicanos, and other Latinos, didn't have a legacy. And I wanted to prove to the world that we were hardworking, that we've been hardworking for 50 years, and that we helped build this country. And this is the Chicano experience. And so, I wrote for that. And then I wrote for the children, for the abused children and the sexually trafficked children, because what I wanted them to know via my own example is that they could have some hope of a normal life, that when all this abuse is going on, that they needed to protect their heart in some basic way to know they were going to be okay, and to also retain hope that when they become young adults, that they can still have the ability to love. And through my own example and through my own loving family, which I developed in my own 40-year marriage and what have you, and my own children, I was able to achieve that. And so I'm hoping that this book helps those in my community of without regard to color, white child, brown child, black child, Asian child, it doesn't matter. We need to protect. And the third reason why I wrote this book, Natasha, is that we have had very few people on the national stage to talk about child trafficking, child mm-hmm. abuse, mm-hmm. and it's mostly been white leadership. And I'm not saying that there's insignificant people of color who brought this forward, but I know of no Latin voice, no Chicano voice, no Mexicano voice who says, A, I went through this. B, I know what it's like. C, I'm here to provide hope that we can make it. And D, we need our seat at the table to discuss how this phenomenon, which occurs hundreds of times a day in this country, gets addressed. It's been swept under the rug for centuries, certainly the last 50 some odd years. And it's only been with the recent court decisions with the Epstein case, apparently as late as yesterday, that she may get 30 to 50 years now, that we've had any sense that of justice. But I want to be part of that justice table for us. And so, my book is really unique, and it is utterly truthful. It is, I'm very lucky to have survived. I came out intact only because my mother Petra loved me, and I was with her until I was 4.5 years old, and I was a mute child, meaning I didn't speak. So I was the only mute child out of 14, and so I received a lot of special attention until she eventually taught me to speak Spanish when I was, almost 4, and she showered me with attention. So when I was taken, I just thought of 2 things. I need to get back to Petra, my mother, who loved me and taught me to love, and I need to get back to my family. And I had thousands of memories. I have an extraordinary memory already, but I had thousands of memories of my family, and they were loving memories. And I knew that was my family, and I was in a horror story that I was stuck in for at least a decade. Now, but I had that North Star. I was going to find my family somehow, some way, and it took me a couple of decades. But you'll find in this story not only great love and hope, but family reconciliation. And that's something which your readership, should take great interest in. And the family came back together after I returned. So people often ask me, how was it that I survived? How did I even begin to survive with what happened to me? And what I would say is that if I hadn't had my mother in my mind, I couldn't have done it. If I hadn't had my family and the thousands of memories, I couldn't have done it. But I knew that I belonged with them, and I knew that I could still love. And so I just stayed within that very limited set of circumstances and held on, because I knew that I had no other choice but to hold on. So I always had persistent hope. I never gave up, and that's not giving up is really what made me what I am today. It was Cesar Chavez who said, "Antonio, you have the talent. You are talentoso enough to be a labor lawyer." I followed that, and then I knew where I was going with my family. And so that gave me the strength to get the advanced degrees that I received. That gave me I'm the only person in my family that has gone past the 7th grade. And I said to myself, who else in my family can articulate what we went through, our hardship, our dignity, our building of this country, within my own family of 14. And I said, well, I think that's me. And it wasn't an easy book to write, let me tell you, as you can tell. But it is utterly truthful, and it shows that you can endure great pain if you have hope And so I took every adverse example and said, all right, you're in this situation. Where do you get the hope from it? Right? What's going to keep you moving forward? Well, one dream is you're going to reunite with your family someday, Antonio. I mean, I'm 5.5, 6 years old, 7 years old. What do I know other than I'm going to go back to my family?
Yeah.
And so when you read the stories, you're going to be seeing me through the eyes of a 4.5-year-old, 5.5-year-old, 6-year-old as I struggle to find my own identity. And remember that the Hobsons were both pedophiles. They were both vicious people. They were both horrific alcoholics. Sarah, obviously engaged in a great deal of torture of me, unfortunately, which was really terrifying, and other forms of terrible manipulation. I just said, I'm never giving in. I will not give in. And so I think they were immensely frustrated by that, but I was a stubborn child.
Mm.
And so and the other thing is, I think, which was very upsetting to them, and particularly with regard to my own Chicano identity, which is what saved me, absolutely saved me, is that I never wanted to be white. I never wanted to be that anglicized Mexicano who was well educated. I wanted to be with my own people, speak my own language, eat our food. I have a couple degrees in Latin American history, so I'm mildly educated in that area. And I thought, looking at the Mexican experience, well, my experience is one of the Mexican experiences in this country. The Salazar's experience is one of the experiences in this country, and it needs to be known. So, it's really, my hope that this book penetrates your readership, and they see that it's very loving, that it's not about exclusively this early abuse. It's certainly the backdrop to the book. But then I prospered, and I prospered with saviors. I prospered with the mother's love, with the family's memories. And then I made it. And at the same time, I followed the dream that Cesar had. And look what I've done with that dream. For 35 years, I've been at the head of labor movements supporting the UFW statewide, nationally. I've known Dolores Huerta for 38 years. I mean, these are people who gave me strength, and so they shaped me, and so I'm eternally grateful, for that, but I also know, as you and I talked earlier, that that children of color are treated very differently, who are lost.
Yeah. So Antonio, my question that is that this is a story that should have been told earlier on. I mean, this is an amazing, heartbreaking stories that I'm surprised it's not a movie, or it's not like all over the news. I mean, it's just mind-blowing what happened to you. And you just published this book three months ago, right? March.
I published it last month.
Last month, exactly. So first of all, why did it take you a long time to tell us this story? And how come the story is not a Hollywood movie? How come the story is not all over the news? How come I just heard about it, from a press release I read? How come it's not all over CNN? I'm just
well, I think that's the question of the day. All right. That is the question. All right. We have been underrepresented. We have virtually no voice. We have virtually no voice of someone who's endured what I endured. We know that for sure. We have no, I am a trial attorney. I work in federal court for 35 years. I have never lost a case in my career. Some of my cases go 3 years. Consent decrees all on behalf of Latino women, on unions, on tribes. I am an advocate. And all I'm just saying is that having a seat at the table, whether it's with me and a bunch of other sisters, right? We need to be there. And I want to raise holy hell and say, look how you have treated us as people of color, children of color, abandoned children of color, raped children of color, sexually trafficked children of color. Instead, you've looked at your white children as you should have. You investigated properly with your white children as you should have. You put them in the national press. They were followed daily in the press until you found them. There were no resources that were held back. Well, for us, there was nothing. In my example, for 2 years, the sheriff's department, the police department in Arizona did nothing to search for me. I came from a monolingual family that spoke Spanish only. We were abysmally poor. We were migrants. We didn't know any English whatsoever, period. And we had a kidnapped child with witnesses, with white people who were never prosecuted in 10 years. And they had the names of the people who took me, and nothing happened. And they closed the case. Now, had I been a white child, I would have been looked for. There would have been an investigatory team. I would have been in the papers, and an enormous effort would have been made. And I probably would have been found. And probably the people who took me would have gone to prison. Now, why didn't any of that occur? What is the one discerning factor? Oh, I'm brown. Oh, I'm poor. What's the discerning factor on the other side? Oh, he's a white child. That's all you need. And so this is the culture we have lived in. And part of the reason why we need to be on the national stage is to say, we're not going to stay in the shadows anymore. We want equality in investigations. We want the same level of counseling services, the same level of police services. We want everything that white children deserve to get. And I want to be really clear. I have no bias against white abducted children. They need the same amount of help that we need, and I embrace them fully. But I have to reflect on how we're treated as Black people, as Asian people, as Latin people, and maybe as other minorities. And so my book is written to prove this example, and to alert us that this is now unacceptable. Now you'll notice, Ms. Tynes, that in the last year and a half, finally the national press has started to pay attention, right? Now this has never happened before. This phenomenon has existed for generations. But we're covering trials. Several billions of dollars of settlement fees have now been paid by universities and religious organizations to settle sexual claims. Several billions of dollars, and there will be more. Policies have been changed. Whole new practices and counselors have been brought in. All that is to the good. It's just that it can't come into a select few of people. It has to be distributed throughout all of us. All of us have to have those advantages. And part of what I talk about in my book is, you have to tell someone if this is happening to you. Well, if you're telling someone and they're not going to do anything about it, if you're telling a white policeman in a racist town this happened by a child and they're not going to do anything about it, that's very discouraging. Now, theoretically, if you tell a counselor or a policeman, they'll immediately report. Well, that's a really significant difference. But why did it take so long?
Yeah, I mean, for me, why did it take that long for you to publish the book? Was it really hard to write, or you didn't find an agent, or you couldn't, I mean, because your story happened almost 30 years ago, correct?
Yeah.
Or more. And why this story has not been told before? Why now?
Well, the reason why is that I wanted to complete my career.
Okay.
I wanted to fully know my family,
Okay.
whom I've now known for 40 years.
Okay.
And I also knew that this was going to be a difficult subject for them to hear about.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, I spent years thinking about writing it. I really did.
Okay.
And it was finally when I started to semi-retire, I said, Antonio, you have an obligation. It's not like, it'd be sort of nice if you did this, but you don't have to, just go sit in the sun. And I said, no, that's not who you are. You're an advocate. You protect people, period. You've got to go protect your family. You have to go protect these children. You have to let them know what happened, and you have to be part of this dialogue. And that's what forced me to sit down and write it. And just as both a social obligation, an emotional obligation, a political obligation, and also knowing that these things, occur throughout the world, as you know, Natasha, they say there are 25 million abducted or enslaved people in this world. I mean, think about that figure.
How many of them are, like Chicanos or Mexicanos or people of color? Do you have any figures on that?
No, we don't. And I think that's just simply lack of research.
Okay.
I think if you were to go into most families, large families, you would find that there would be some level of difficulty. Not saying that it would occur, but some level of ignorance on these issues, right? And every one of these families, in order to protect their children, need to be educated, need to know about the resources that they can call. My book has a list of 20 resources in every language that people can call, parents and children alike, as to how to get help. Now, help is really one phone call away. It wasn't like that when I was young.
Yeah.
And so we're beginning a new generation of responsibility, but whether it's penetrating, whether it's getting through to all the families, right? If we don't have a full national discussion about how people of color are affected, I can only believe that it's not getting through to us. It's a bunch of white people whom I admire. I'm talking about white allies whom I admire deeply. But it's a bunch of white allies telling us how it could be. We can tell them how it is. We can tell them what we have lived through and survived. This is not a social experiment. This is what we've endured. And so that's why we need to have, our voices there. So
what was the reaction to the book? I mean, because I was like looking at the reviews. The reviews are positive, but I wanted to, was there shock? The same amount of shock that I endured when I reading this. I couldn't believe this actually happened. And what Did you get any, or it's still new? You're still trying to
Yeah,
spread the
no.
word about it.
Well,
But can
I've,
you adjust your camera a bit because your half of your face is hidden?
okay.
Uh,
How's that?
yeah, it's
How's that better? I
yeah.
apologize.
Oh,
What I was going to say is, I think I received 4 or 5 reviews, including Kirkus. I just received 3 more last week, all very positive. I think the the challenge of the book, I was lucky to find a publisher quite quickly for it,
okay,
with an agent, is that, I made a judgment call,
okay,
and that judgment call was a difficult one to make. And I decided that I needed to write a book that didn't just fade into gray as to what abuse looked like.
okay,
Now, I only have about 8 pages that are graphic in the entire book,
okay.
maybe 7. That's it.
Yeah, the
But
beginning of the book. Yeah,
in the first, I think like page 60 or 70,
yeah,
somewhere in there.
yeah,
But I wanted people to say, let's not have any illusions. It's not like you abuse a child and it goes to gray and you don't know what happens to them.
yeah,
This is what happens to them because this is what happened to me.
yeah.
And I felt that they needed to have that dose of reality.
Okay.
And it was painful to write about it. I wrote a very diminished version of what had really occurred to me. And I think editors were probably shocked by the frankness there.
Mm,
But I wasn't aware of any other memoir like this. I've had many publishers look into it, my press people and what have you. None of them have found a book like this. And so that's why I think it deserves its own unique place. I hope there will be more books written by our community, by our people.
mm,
I've spent a lot of time on Spanish radio with this as well. I'm hoping that as you said, that I will break through. It's only been 6 weeks, but I'm not going to stop being a spokesperson. And I'm going to just keep driving this and driving this and driving this until we do have that seat at the table, and people understand us for what we endure and what we're willing to do about it. And what we're willing to do about it is to stand up now. And that's not something that we've said before.
So you think some mainstream media or mainstream editors and publishers did not want to publish this because there were scenes that were too graphic? Is that what you think happened?
I think there were a couple of publishers that were taken aback. I will tell you, I received many letters from publishers.
Okay.
Okay, when I say many, I received 4 letters from publishers
Wow.
that read that, and I was expecting many rejections.
Okay.
I received 4 letters from publishers rejecting the book.
Okay.
And each of them took the time to write incredibly kind letters to me.
Okay.
Saying, this is the book that needs to be published.
Yeah.
You have to get this published. It doesn't fit in our wheelhouse, but this book is important. Don't give up.
Okay.
And then those are followed by actually a publisher accepting it on the spot, reading it through the weekend and saying, yes, we'll do this book. But, you and I believe, Ms. Tynes, are just at the forefront here.
Yeah.
We're about to take on a battle here that can be won, needs to be won. That needs to be inclusive of all people, and this is about our children, and how they survive as young adults. What else is more important than our children? And so that's why I didn't write the sanitized version. This is what, in this particular case, what white pedophiles did to me and how they shared me.
So do you think that the fact that you were mute, you were Mexican, made you more attractive to them, made you an easier target. What, let's say you were a white kid in a poor neighborhood, they would not have kidnapped you. They would have realized that, okay, your parents are not gonna fight enough for you because they don't speak English.
I think that's exactly the case. I mean, what they did is that they cherry picked a child. They
Okay.
cherry picked a child who they believed was mute
Yeah. Yeah.
and couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
All right. And they picked a child who was disposable. Why am I disposable? Because I'm a poor Mexican kid. They knew no one's going to look after me. I'm a mute child who can't speak for myself, and I'm taken overnight, and that's it.
And you
You
had
know, I mean,
13 other siblings, so like
yes,
for them, yeah. Yeah.
and so what do they have to worry about? They're just going to go into their white pedophile community, and their white pedophile males are going to take advantage, and the police aren't going to come because they're going to believe white people to begin with, right? And they're already close to the police in some way or another. And so with impunity, not a single charge, not, and I'll tell you the one thing that was, it's modestly off topic, but, John and Sarah in my senior year sent me to juvenile hall. All right. And they sent me to juvenile hall because I was an incorrigible child. And I was living in a $3.50 a night motel, which was the cheapest motel for 40 miles on the freeway. Lived there for 4 years and under 200 square feet with two crazy people, John and Sarah. So
El
they
Rancho,
sent,
El Rancho Motel, was it called? El Rancho?
it's called the El Rancho Motel, and there's a
Yeah.
picture of it in the book.
Yeah.
And so I went there, and they examined me for 8 days, and I looked out my window, and I looked across the street, and I could see the window where John had just been institutionalized for 5 months, saying he had no family. Okay. It's just an odd coincidence. And then what happened is that I met with the counselors, and there were 6 of them, and they brought me into the room, and I was frightened because it was like day 9. I had no idea. I was graduating in 3 weeks. I thought I was going to be sent to reform school. I had almost a straight A average, student body president of 4,000. I mean, I was doing very well. And they went around the table and they said, we've made one determination, Antonio. It's that John and Sarah Hobson are insane. They are insane. And we're passing out our cards to you with our home cell phone numbers. And you can come with us until you leave for college, any of us, and we will get you there. And that was the first validation of the insanity that I lived in. And I was released and tossed out pretty much the next day, to live on my own, and life moved on. But I had particularly, vindictive people, John and Sarah. They wrote to my college and said I didn't deserve any of my scholarships and to disqualify me as a student. So when I arrived at college, I had nothing, and I had to fight back just to get my scholarship. So it was a long daily struggle of holding me back. So what I did is I just said, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to get this education no matter what. And I had a new savior by the name of Norman O'Brown, who came and had my monies restored. But I'm just saying that this is how crazy they were. And once I was able to leave and go to college at age 16, I never went back. And it was a hard life. As you know, I spent 4 years picking fruit in the fields, to make money. And I worked 5 years in canneries. I'm not some kind of bourgeois Mexican, as you can tell.
Yeah.
And I identify as a working class Mexican person. I have an adopted class status just simply because I'm now educated. I get that, but
So why did you keep the last name, Hobson?
Okay, now this is a very interesting story.
Okay.
I
mean, I was like, okay, why would you have the name of the abuser as your last name?
Yeah. Okay. Well, what happened is that I graduated from law school.
Okay.
And every one of my degrees, my undergraduate, master's degrees, had the name Antonio Salazar-Hobson. And so what I did is, on the very first court case that I handled, I went into court and I said, I need the hyphen name. I need the hyphen added because I refuse to be addressed as Mr. Hobson. And, but I didn't want to, lose. I was worried about somehow confusing, the loss of my degrees. And so all my career, I've been known as Salazar-Hobson. Obviously now, if I could rip the name from my flesh, I would. But, I was a young man at the time and just trying to survive my first legal job.
But you have it on the book. Was it like just to say that this is a true story? I mean, why would you, if like as an author, you can you can call yourself Mickey Mouse. I mean, nobody calls, right? Nobody cares. So why would you keep their name on the book?
Well, it's because who I am. I mean, if you call me, if you see my email, it's Salazar-Hobson, and it is a mistake I think I probably made 38 years ago. I would consider doing it now, but I'm past the Hobsons. I make them as little a part of me as I possibly can.
Is their name on your license?
Everything.
Oh wow.
It's.
I mean, you can easily go to court and change it, right? I mean,
yes, yeah, I could. I guess I could do that one more time, and I mean, and maybe you're inspiring me at this very moment to do it. Certainly, I have the capacity. So
yeah, I'm just curious because, well, it does make for an interesting story that you kept their name. I think it adds more authenticity to your story if people doubt what you said. Yeah. Because when I was reading, I was like, is this true? I mean, could this true? I mean, like I started looking at the pictures. I could not believe it. I mean, it was stranger than fiction, which led me to the question is, now with the age, because your story happened what in the 50s, right?
In the 60s.
So, in the 60s. So now in the age of social media and TV 24/7, all of that, do you think the Hobsons would have got away with it?
No, absolutely not. I think the fact that we have computers, police computers and what have you, we could have found them. But at the same time, you have to realize I was in a trap. Yeah. Because John and Sarah told me two falsehoods. One is that the reason I'd been kidnapped is that I told my parents about my abuse. Well, of course, I was a mute child, so that was impossible, but I believed them anyway, as young 4.5-year-olds and 5-year-olds do. And then as I got older, 5.5, 6, 7, and it started thousands of times, I was told that if I were to say anything, that they would go to prison that night, and that I would be sent off to an institution, and that I would never have a chance to find my family. Mm-hmm. And that was drilled into me many times a day. And I was so fearful that I would be lost in the system that I just said I will stay here and survive so that I can go find my family. Because if I'm in the system, I had visited institutions where John had been. I saw how terrible they were. I mean, mental institutions where John had been. I saw how terrible they were. They scared me. I didn't know if that's where I was going to be sent. And so I just stayed quiet and angry. Mm-hmm. That's the true story.
Yeah. I want to go back to your publishing story. So the publisher that picked up your book, is it what kind of a publisher is it? And how did you find them?
Well,
did you just send cold emails, or how did that happen?
No, I didn't send any cold emails to anybody. Uh,
Okay.
I I uh, uh, I hired an agent, Leticia Gomez, who's well known, and she has worked with this woman before who was specialized in memoirs.
Okay.
She's been around about 35 years, and she read the book over a weekend and said, "I want this book right now."
Okay.
And so uh, that's I was just very lucky, and I mean I never underestimate how lucky I was to and she turned out to be a very patient publisher. I would say that.
And it's based in Oregon, right?
It's
Wyatt Mackenzie Publishing is
yes,
yeah.
and and my understanding is that she may have done as many as 100 memoirs in her career, on top of other things
Okay.
that she's done. So
So it's is it a small press or like an or independent publisher or
I would call it a small press.
okay, okay. Yeah, I'm just curious because this podcast as well, just to inspire people who also want to tell their stories, how to find publishers, how to find agents, and all of that. So when I read this book, I realized like you added a lot of details when you were like 4 years old. For example, when you met Sarah's mom at the restaurant, you even described the counter where you sat. You
Yeah,
described seeing the reflection
yeah.
of them. And you were what, four? I mean, did
No,
you keep a
no,
journal? I mean,
no.
how did you manage to add all these details?
Okay.
Do you have a
Well,
journal?
no, no,
Yeah.
I never have a journal, but I do have an extraordinary memory. My main role is I'm a labor negotiator, all right, for 35 years.
Okay.
I can remember bargaining notes that are 32 years old of a notation I made on page 220.
Okay.
I just happen to have a really good memory. And since as a mute child, you don't have the senses that you would normally have, right? You have heightened senses. All you have are your eyes and your memories. And so I I guess I just benefited from being mute, and it was almost like everything was on film. And that was just and that's followed me. That innate talent has followed me, all my life. And I would let me remind you that I had thousands of images of my family, not like one or two or three, not hundreds, but thousands. Uh, I had, I had was showered with the blessings of my mother every hour throughout the day. You don't forget things like that. And so, it just, you know, I know that we don't do readings on that show, but I did do a reading, which I'll summarize, which is, I long for my family every day, and I long for a way to be in touch with them every day. And so what I did when I was 5.5 years old through 7, and I'll give you an example of how I remembered them, is I lived in this adobe house, and I found these extra bricks. And with these bricks, I would put them under my favorite tree, and I would have the same number of bricks for all the siblings. And each day I would ritually bury them every day, and I would then I would excavate them and talk to them and tell them what was happening that day and how much I loved them, how much I was coming home, and to not forget me. I
Mm-hmm.
did that for 2 years, just to stay connected. And then by the time I was 7, my mind had really opened, and it turned out that I happened to be a modestly bright child. And that's why I was advanced 3 grades and everything else. But it, if I hadn't had that talent of memory, it would have been different. But I do, and so
So what is your plan now to spread the word about your book? I mean, you're on this podcast, and are you getting the attention that it deserves? Where is people noticing? Are you getting emails from people? Where are you going next with the book?
Well, I think what I would do is I will continue to do national podcasts such as yours.
Okay.
And that's been very important. And I've been able to do, between a half dozen or more of these. And I think that will continue to build. What I'm looking for is obviously, people who are responsive to this issue, agree that this abuse should be highlighted, and then looking for ideas from people about how they think I would fit in. I'm an advocate. I have an idea about how I would fit in.
Yeah.
I don't have,
Yeah.
I mean, it is just, my goal is to break through and say, I'm here, I'm ready, and let me be a part of it. So I'm working on that. I have some possibilities of being on other stations. I don't know, but I'm not giving up. And I'm not giving up this year. I'm not giving up next January when it's the month of the trafficked child. I'm going forward.
Why would anyone, like any journalist or any media station, not accept the story? I mean, like for example, why aren't you on CNN? And I ask that. For me, as a trained journalist, like this is a story. I mean, regardless of how I personally feel about it, this is a story that has to be told. Yeah. Why would any journalist refuse to talk about this?
Well, that's a curious thing. I mean, we are putting our names before various people, and I don't know. I mean, we have received 50% positive responses.
Okay.
And so that's good. I don't know why the issue frightens people. It seems like he wrote a book that's a little too intense. No, it's not too intense. It's 7 damn pages.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Yeah. I mean, I got over it. I'm a mom with children, and it's it was, I mean, it needed to be told.
Yes. Yeah. And then, go embrace this work, because there's never going to be another me like me. There will be many abused Mexican children. There will be many abused Chicano children and children of color every day, right now. That's why there's an urgency to stop it now. And so what I want to be able to convey, as I've been conveying to you so well, and you of course picked up upon, which is, there's no false urgency here. There's just an absolute urgency. This dialogue has to take place. Yeah. And it can't take place exclusively at the hands of Caucasian representatives. It can't take place exclusively at the hands of people who have not gone through this experience. It needs to take place with people who have lived it, shaped their entire lives by it, and have somehow made it a success, and are now willing to talk openly about what happened to them. So I share your own bewilderment, but yeah. I'm not going anywhere, and because I think I owe it to my people. I think I owe it to my family, and and I'm excited that some of the environment is changing. I think I will break out eventually.
Yeah.
And with you being being known as one of the early pioneers already, but you being one of the early pioneers, and this is going to be very helpful.
I can't wait to, release this episode, and it's been amazing talking to you. Like it's just, I will never forget the story.
Yeah.
And any last words you want to say, because we're
yes
yeah,
I do have a couple of last words, and let me just say that what they were, and I don't Let me just see if I can find them. The last words that I just wanted to say was that I wanted to start as I end. Antonio, we know you as a love story. It's a love story of my mother, Petra, the Mexican families who helped me, the intervention by Cesar Chavez at 15, which changed my life. It is a book about hope, perseverance, and pride. Although the book does discuss a theme of early child abuse, I swear to you, te le juro, to my audience, that is not the focus of my book. It's about victorious family reconciliations, something to be celebrated by all our people. And finally, it's about how we as Chicanos will continue to fight. And I want to thank your entire audience for listening to me today and giving me even more strength to carry on.
Thank you so much, Antonio. For anyone who's listening or watching, please read this book. It's called Antonio, We Know You. It's on Amazon, and it just, I finished it in one day, honestly. So it's just an amazing book. Please go buy it, and thank you again, Antonio.
Okay. And it can be bought on virtually any platform, by the way.
Yeah.
Barnes and Noble, Amazon,
Okay.
what have you, under my name, under the book, what have you, it's there.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.